All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Dave here, talking about real heavy duty issues here within the context of the music world, but doing it in real time for a couple of real people out there, just like you, just like me. Like 2 out of every 74 people are watching these videos. So thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. Even if you don't like me, just subscribe. It's I'm begging at this point. And watch the videos, share the videos. We've got Patreon, we've got YouTube memberships for folks, and we also have modern retro radio that you should tune into. They are like radio friends. They are radio partners as we both kind of trudge along and try without much success to get the world listening to material that other radio stations aren't really playing. So I said this was going to be a little bit of a heavy topic, and it is. So Roger Waters, I think, has officially been turned into a villain. And the question is, does he deserve to be a villain? Does Roger Waters, who back in the early days of Pink Floyd, and then, during the height of Pink Floyd, Roger Waters was always kind of looked at as like a musical genius, right? And the topics that he covered back in those days are pretty much the same topics that he has been covering recently. And so who moved? Was it the media? Was it the prevailing narrative? Did that move, or did Roger Waters move? This is an important question in this debate because they're basically calling Roger Waters an anti-Semite, and they're doing it more and more. And does he deserve to be called that? Is he an anti-Semite? So here's the story. Roger Waters has responded to allegations of anti-Semitism levied in a new documentary released by the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. I didn't know there was a group called that, but there are all kinds of groups I'm not familiar with. This group is called the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, and it's entitled The Dark Side of Roger Waters. And Waters, is calling the film a flimsy, unapologetic piece of propaganda. All right, so what is this film about? Well, the documentary, which is available on YouTube, so maybe you can watch this for free, claims that Waters sent emails in which he proposed using various anti-Semitic slurs and iconography during his concerts. Now, when he sent those emails, first of all, he probably should have taken a lesson from Hillary Clinton and figured out how to use BleachBit or smash the server or whatever needs to be done. And I'm not saying he should have done this to cover up his crime here, but when they say something is an anti-Semitic slur, what are they actually talking about? Like this iconography that he's using in the concerts. They've kind of turned that around on him, where 40-something years ago, people thought it was really effective during the wall to show these authoritarians doing evil things to people that didn't deserve it. And most people affiliated what was happening with what happened with Nazi Germany. That's a given, right? And the Germans were obviously, at the time, just to say it very mildly here, they weren't fans of the Jewish people. Okay, we could say it that way, which doesn't really do justice to what happened. But in any event, a lot of us, I think, when we were listening to that music, were saying, wow, that was a horrible thing. And I wasn't alive, so when I heard this music, I then began doing some research and realized that this was, I think, just a history lesson for those of us who didn't live through it. So anyway, the film contains claims from Waters' former saxophonist Norbert Stachel that Waters once demanded restaurant waiters take away all the Jewish food. Can you imagine that you would just say, hey, could you remove all of the Jewish food? From where? Where are they taking it away from? The menu? The table? That sounds very fake to me. And producer Bob Ezrin, the brilliant Bob Ezrin, who just really got a lot out of Pink Floyd and a number of other bands. I think he also worked with Alice Cooper, if I remember, who recalled that Waters was singing an inappropriate ditty about late music representative Brian Morrison being a bleeping Jew. Okay. It's just, I don't know how to respond to that. I'm just thinking to myself, if that did happen and Ezrin recalled that, why would he continue to work with, or maybe he never did work again with Roger Waters? Why wouldn't you go to Roger and say, hey, Roger, I don't think that was appropriate? But here we are. We've got the documentary. So one cannot help but watch this film and wonder, what kind of person uses their power to this effect? This comes from CAA Chief Executive Gideon Falter. Is Roger Waters an anti-Semite? Now people can make up their own minds. Okay, well, I think if you tell just one side of any story, it's hard for people to make up their minds. Two statements here that look very bad for Roger Waters, but one of them looks very fake. Take all the Jewish food away. Oh, okay, sure. I just can't imagine that anyone would say that to a waiter, even if they were an anti-Semite. They'd have to be some kind of caffeinated, crazy anti-Semite to go that far. One cannot help but watch this film and wonder, right? Because that's the premise here. When you watch the film, your opinions are then formed, and then that's the end of that. So Waters responded to the dark side of Roger Waters with a statement. All my life, I have used the platform my career has given me to support causes I believe in. I passionately believe in universal human rights. I have always worked to make the world a better, more just, and more equitable place for all of my brothers and sisters all over the world, irrespective of their ethnicity, religion, or nationality, from indigenous peoples threatened by the U.S. oil industry to Iranian women protesting for their rights. This is why I am active in the non-violent protest movement against the Israeli government's illegal occupation of Palestine and its egregious treatment of Palestinians. Those who wish to conflate that position with anti-Semitism do a great service to all. Now, I think that paragraph is really well written, because if you're critiquing Israel, you immediately become an anti-Semite. I think that's what people say. And I did a couple of videos, not necessarily supporting Roger Waters, but trying to understand what he's saying. And people are like, by you bringing attention to this, you're part of the problem too. You might be anti-Semitic. I'm like, no, I don't have any ill will toward any group of people. I don't think in those terms. I hear crazy stuff, though, mostly on the internet, in different places. And a lot of these people, by the way, support Donald Trump for president. Just putting it out there. Some of the things that I've heard them say, absolutely over the top. And I'll just leave it there. So the Pink Floyd co-founder said, the CAA gave me 7 days to respond to multiple questions about matters dating back to the year 2002 and also 2010, and claimed the organization's core purpose is waging partisan political campaigns against critics of the state of Israel. So I knew their questions were not asked in good faith. I think he makes a valid point there. Truth is, I'm frequently mouthy and prone to irreverence. Yes, he is. I can't recall what I said 13 or more years ago. I've worked closely for many years with many Jewish people, musicians, and others. If I have upset the two individuals who appear in the film, I'm sorry for that, but I can say with certainty that I am not and never have been an anti-Semite, as anyone who really knows me will testify. I know the Jewish people to be a diverse, interesting, and complicated bunch, just like the rest of humanity. Many are allies in the fight for equity and justice in Israel, Palestine, and around the world. The film totally distorts and misrepresents my views about the Israeli state and its political ideology called Zionism. It relies on a definition of anti-Semitism that sees criticizing Israel as inherently anti-Semitic and assumes that Zionism is an essential element in Jewish identity. These opinions, clearly shared by the presenter and the two interviewees, are widely contested by many, including many Jewish people. Now, this is where his argument gets a little bit weak for me. He's been great so far, but this is what he says here. As for the offensive words used in the emails, Waters said they were my brainstorming ideas on how to make the evils and horrors of fascism and extremism apparent and shocking to a generation that may not fully appreciate the ever-present threat. They are not the manifestation of any underlying bigotry as the film suggests. Now, the brainstorming ideas of sending offensive words or posting offensive words on the big screen at the concert, it depends again on the context, but this almost sounds like he's trying to make an excuse for sending these emails. It's just very similar, if you recall, when Pete Townsend had an issue many years ago. And apparently they had confiscated videos of him watching young children. Okay, that's all I'll say. People know the story about Pete Townsend. Nobody has spoken of it in a very long time. And Pete Townsend said something like, yeah, I was doing research. He was doing research. Okay, so that sounded kind of similar to that. Maybe not. It's definitely not as bad as what Pete Townsend did. That's for sure. In summary, Waters concluded the film is a flimsy, unapologetic piece of propaganda that indiscriminately mixes things I'm alleged to have said or done at different times and in different contexts in an effort to portray me as an anti-Semite without any foundation in fact. Allegations of anti-Semitism have dogged Waters throughout 2023. So the article here is really pointed at making him look like an anti-Semite and to really turning him into a villain. He drew criticism earlier this year for wearing a Nazi-like costume during his performance in Berlin, prompting an investigation from German police. Now, a bunch of fairly high-profiled rock stars did come to his defense. Officials in Frankfurt tried to have his concert canceled. He was ultimately permitted to perform. Waters chalked the investigation up to bad faith attacks from those who want to smear and silence me. In addition, the U.S. State Department condemned Waters' controversial attire in June, saying he has a long track record of using anti-Semitic tropes and that his Berlin concert contained imagery that is deeply offensive to Jewish people, and then also saying that this minimized the Holocaust. I don't know if that was his intention at all. I mean, like I said, in the early days of Pink Floyd, when I say early days, I'm talking late 70s. I mean, the early days would be like the late 60s, but that stuff during the Wall, most people who watched that, they were looking at the Nazis as the authoritarians. And I think that's how it came off. And you could relate to that. And so that had nothing to do with this topic now, where he's saying that maybe there's a problem between Israel and Palestine, and that maybe a diplomatic, peaceful solution would fix that problem. He's not advocating for violence or anything. He's using words, he's using imagery. Now, if he really did say to that waiter, hey, get rid of all the Jewish food, that's kind of nutty, right? But that just sounds very far-fetched to me. Of all the things in this, that sounds the most far-fetched. And the stuff that Bob Ezrin said, I don't know. He sang a song and specifically targeted a former record executive, Brian Morrison, late music representative, being a bleeping Jew. I don't know. I think that there is so much tearing down in this world. Like, okay, this is what you said this year, so we can link it up with something that happened 10 years after that. And he's constantly been an advocate for marginalized groups. And a lot of these marginalized groups, I don't necessarily empathize with, but we really need to be objective. All right, who's causing the problem here? Is it Israel? Is it Palestine? Is it both of them? Could be both, right? Why does it have to be one or the other? He's decided that Israel shouldn't be doing what they're doing. And a lot of people say, well, wait a minute. They're the chosen people. They should be able to do whatever they want to do. It's like manifest destiny for the entire world, And I don't agree with that. I know there is theology to back up that point of view. There is pretty airtight theology, and I read it and I go, wow. And then people will say, well, was God talking about Israel, or was he talking about his church? And then you get this whole new theology that came about and now is really not in style. It's really the theology that supports Israel, kind of almost not looking at what they're doing, just saying we support them no matter what they do. And I don't know if that is a good idea. I don't know if that's a good thing. I think we should all strive for peace, just like in Ukraine. There should be peace in Ukraine. How do you make peace in Ukraine? You negotiate. Diplomacy. You don't send more weapons. How do you negotiate the peace between Israel and Palestine? You sit down, you have conversations, and you work through it. And you figure out, okay, are you really oppressing these people? And you have to bring in independent sources. You can't just bring in the two sides. You have to bring in others who can observe what's really happening, because there's three sides to every story. There's my side, there's your side, and then there's the truth, right? So we need to get to the truth. And I'm thinking in this case with Roger Waters, they're really just trying to make this guy into a villain at this stage. Just go away, Roger. We've had enough. Your shtick was good 40 years ago. We really enjoyed The Wall. We enjoyed all of that great music, that thought-provoking stuff you put out there. And you had Dave Gilmour playing guitar to it. And the kids really dug it. They're all in their basements. They're opening the albums and they're sparking up the doobies and stuff. And that's what that was. But you learned something from those lyrics, and it made you investigate what was the Holocaust. Oh my gosh, I can't believe they did this. It's insane. And to say he minimized the Holocaust, I don't think he's trying to minimize the Holocaust. I mean, you hear this a lot, where people come along and they have a different point of view, and they say, oh, they're trying to say only, 100,000 people died or some stupid number. And it's really painful. I mean, this is historical fact. It's historical record. And there's this general tearing down of facts and statistics as the years go by. And between the AI and the fact that people have short attention spans and they don't want to do any homework. They don't want to look back. I mean, it might be good to get yourself an old set of Encyclopedia Britannica. And here's why, because that's paper and ink written down. That's not the internet. The internet can be forged. The internet can be deleted and re-uploaded and edited. And so the history that was written down, that's going to be more precious as time goes on. You can't trust this new history. And if somebody puts out a documentary and they don't allow for opposing views to kind of give it balance, yeah, maybe Roger Waters said some inappropriate things. But overall, is he advocating for violence against the Jewish people? Doesn't sound like he is. Doesn't sound, I mean, just to say, I don't like you because you're of this religion or this race, I don't think he's saying that. But obviously he's been made into a villain, and everybody is pretty much on the same page with this. So even yours truly coming out and speaking on this isn't going to be my number one video. It's just, I'm just advocating for balance. I'm not saying Waters is right. I'm just advocating for looking at the entire situation rather than jumping to conclusions. And again, these are rock media websites. They don't talk about, Waters putting out the new version of Dark Side of the Moon, which, by the way, so far I'm not a fan of, but okay. He is putting out music. I think Roger did great work during the lockdown. He sounded great. He had this band basically unplugged, and he was doing some really great stuff for his age. I mean, he's not the greatest vocalist, never has been, but that's kind of part of his routine, the way he presents everything, and it gives it more of an edge and makes it interesting. So he's not my number one cup of tea, Roger Waters. I can tell you that. He's the occasional, when you want something a little bit weird and different, you might grab yourself a cup of Roger Waters off the shelf there. But for the most part, I'm more a fan of David Gilmour's playing and his singing. That's why when these two guys were together, that was kind of a magical duo, along with the rest of a very fine band, which, could still be doing some stuff out there. You got three guys anyway that could probably still do stuff. But, David Gilmour is definitely on the other side of this conversation, and the media definitely favors what David Gilmour has to say. And I don't necessarily agree with David Gilmour and what he has to say. I think he's been unnecessarily cruel to his former bandmate, and his wife too gets in on this, and it's like tag team Roger's an anti-Semite, and I don't know. You're going to have to decide. The documentary does ask the question. You'll probably watch the documentary and say, yeah, Roger is definitely an anti-Semite. Well, Roger might want to be a part of a documentary exposing what's really going on between Israel and Palestine, and that will give the conversation some balance. I bet you the media probably won't cover that part because they have an agenda, and they certainly want to prop up one side over the other side. Years ago, though, you could critique Israel. You can't do that anymore, which is, I think, the whole point here about what Roger Waters is saying. All right, so that's my video on this topic. You can vehemently disagree with me for just talking about this, because I've been told you really shouldn't even talk about this, and I get that. Maybe I'll throw this over on Politically Homeless, or it'll be here and there, and you can decide for yourself. But I think people should talk about these issues, because if you don't talk about them, you're just going to believe what the media tells you about it, and don't do that. Definitely don't do that, because you can't really trust any of the mainstream media today. And my views on that haven't changed, and they probably will never change unless the people themselves rise up and do their own media their own reporting, their own research. That's the only way you're going to take this back. All right, people.